The way Nicktoons have been treated for the past 20 years has been nothing short of disheartening. Many talented creators have come around and given Nickelodeon great ideas with a lot of potential, but they tend to be dropped before they can stretch their wings. It seems to have gotten even worse in this era where cable TV's relevance is diminishing, but on the cusp of this era, there was a Nicktoon mishandled so egregiously that I can confidently say it was too pure for this world. Harvey Beaks. This was very special and different from a lot of the Nicktoon catalogue surrounding it. A show about friendship that discussed relationships in some depth. A show set in a vibrant world with ample atmosphere and quiet moments. Slice of life scenarios front and center for the first time in years. And Nick dropped it as soon as they let it underperform. I think any TV show can flourish if it's given strong enough promotion, and that's an uphill battle for modern Nicktoons that only gets steeper by the year. But what about Harvey Beaks makes its treatment especially hard to stomach? Well, that story can start at the creator, Carl Harvey Greenblatt. This was his second show after Chowder, which he had made over at Cartoon Network and which I've already made a video on. His next cartoon, originally titled Bad Seeds, was something he began working on shortly after the end of Chowder in 2010. He aimed to make something softer and more atmospheric than Chowder, and was on the road to succeeding. Nickelodeon picked it up around 2012 and produced a pilot in 2013. And soon, it morphed into a more recognizable series called Harvey Tweets. It then had to have its name changed again because making a show about a blue bird with that surname was a lawsuit waiting to happen. So Tweets got crossed out and changed to Beaks, and the show premiered on Nickelodeon on March 28, 2015. Reception to it was some of the warmest a Nicktoon got in the 2010s. The art, characters, humor, and tone were all subject to praise from Nickelodeon fans who felt that the last couple comedy-centric Nicktoons had fallen flat. They had their fans, but Harvey had prestige. Contrary to historical perception, the ratings for it were okay, hovering around or slightly above the 1 million range, about half of what Nicktoons would get in the early 2000s, but satisfactory by 2015 and friggin' spectacular by now. Only problem is, Nickelodeon put less effort into promoting it or rerunning it as time went on, and vaguely announced that it was off the main schedule in the fall of 2016. This upset CH Greenblatt, and he took to Tumblr to express his disappointment in having to find this out via the internet, but Nickelodeon forced him to retract his statements a couple days later. And while you could say he was still working for them and should have followed whatever contractual obligations prevented him from speaking negatively of them, this was Nickelodeon mistreating the creation of a SpongeBob alumnus, a writer and storyboard artist on some of the most popular episodes of their cash cow franchise. They should have known he would have put up some resistance and defend his team of artists. But sadly, no positive change came out of this kerfuffle. Harvey Beaks left Nickelodeon on December 9th, 2016, and spent 2017 gradually putting out its last couple Season 2 episodes on the Nicktoons network. An all-too-familiar story that ended in all-too-familiar way on December 29th, 2017. Since then, CH Greenblatt has moved on from Nick entirely and returned to a Warner Brothers division to create his third show, Jellystone, for HBO Max. That show returned to the zanier style of Chowder, and I adore it for that, which currently makes Harvey Beaks look like the quiet middle child of his family. But can it prove itself capable of making a big mess of laughs? Harvey Beaks is, of course, about a character called Harvey Beaks. He lives in a woodland town called Little Bark Grove and hangs out with the local children, but mostly these two imps, Fee and Foo, raised by themselves in the forest. Harvey comes from a different background to them, growing up following rules and acting on his best behaviour. But Fee and Foo never follow anyone's rules, not even their own. Much of the show is them all getting in and out of trouble, but sometimes, funnily enough, the trouble is caused by Harvey's unbelievable goodliness. You can see why this premise was appealing to Nickelodeon on a conceptual level. During their heyday, their marketing strategy was to push a kids-first attitude with wild and messy activities. While this strategy was downplayed by the mid-2000s, it's still baked into the general public's understanding of the network. So to have a show that teaches the importance of breaking out of your comfort zone with the promise that most of the main trio are wild and messy kids, that's an ideal way to keep the Nickelodeon spirit alive and prominent in the show. Harvey is a 9-year-old blue bird who reminds me of how much I've talked about blue birds recently. Stay tuned for my Rio fan cam. But Harvey makes for a compelling protagonist. He's nice, innocent, and a bit sheltered, but is open to suggestion. When he cracks under pressure, he really cracks, but can't cause any real harm. Harvey's a likable enough guy to follow no matter how much you resembled him as a kid. Fee and Fu are siblings and have recently become Harvey's best friends. How recently depends on what season they say so, but it's clear there's a lot about their uncivilized ways that Harvey finds fascinating. The sister Fee knows what rules are and tries to break them, while Fu doesn't know what rules are at all. Fee is given more to say and do because it's clear that despite her lifestyle, she has more of a conscience, while Fu is more innocent and equipped for a smaller variety of stories. They work as a duo and as separate protagonists, but keep a closer eye on Fee. Another way Harvey stands out in the trio is that he's fortunate enough to have a family, 2 loving parents named Irving and Miriam. Irving is the more laid back of the two, and I could guess more responsible. He'll sometimes partake in father-son activities with Harvey, where his kind-hearted squareness will put him to the test. Miriam is the more interesting of the 2 parents. Superficially, she seems exactly like Irving at first, but it becomes more apparent that she's got a wild side to her from her youth that she's repressing less now. I enjoyed seeing her get fleshed out a little more across the show, and learn that her calmer adult demeanor is both her growing up and a slight sacrifice for Harvey's safety. The pair take care of an egg throughout season 1, which is bound to hatch at some point, right? Harvey's family is important to him, and so is his extended circle of friends. Here they are in no particular order. Dade, first of all, used to be Harvey's BFF before Fee and Fu came along, and he's a clingy little rabbit who's often quite forceful whenever he's around Harvey again. Dade's the kind of guy who still writes angry letters to Quentin Tarantino demanding to know what was in the briefcase. There's an incompleteness to his life despite his large family of brothers and sisters that he hates living with. If he wasn't so pitiable, he'd be more annoying, but as is, he adds some spice to the show. Claire is a shy fox who, when not part of the background, is a sensitive soul. She keeps implying that her family puts immense pressure on her to be an overachiever, which would be sad if we ever met them. They give her a few things to do, like drawing manga and having a crush on Fu. It makes her life a little less depressing, so thumbs up. Ruder is an Australian boar whose main characteristics are being strong and Australian. Never mind his dad is clearly a New Zealander who's always on the verge of telling me about the new low prices at Pack and Save. But back to Ruta, he's fine. He adds the minimum of a multicultural flair to the lineup. Techno Bear is a bear who dances to techno music in Speedos. Who thought this character up, and why is he as entertaining as he is? The Brooklyn accent adds an extra dollop to the weirdness, and I bet they wanted his Jersey turtle parents to do that too, but personally, I find it nice that he's found a family. Peri Peri scares me, another bird in the group who's unreasonably positive all the time. There had to be something hiding under the surface, but not really, it's difficult to make her sad. It's good to have a character like this to prop up Harvey, show that at least his attitude is realistic. Kratz is a skunk, so naturally, the source of some gross out jokes initially. Those jokes don't last long, but I don't think there's a lot to replace them. He has the same kind of role as Claire, being kind of a loser and finding refuge in art and storytelling. It's disappointing they weren't paired up in any way. Lastly, there's Princess, an egocentric owl who considers herself the best at everything, and never lets the spotlight veer away from her. She's the closest thing this show has to an antagonistic force, where in any other show, she'd just be a nuisance. She has more of an impact here, given how sharp of a contrast she makes to the rest of the cast. Her family situation says a lot about her, with her single father, Dr. Roberts, doing the bare minimum in taking care of her. He's one of those characters that got recast at a later date from Matt Berry to Jeff Bennett, and I was shocked at how good Bennett's impression of his predecessor was.
Everyone stand back. I am a doctor, and I have just the thing for the situation. We'll use the power of crystals.
Princess, don't you want to help Daddy steer? With both of us using our energy, we might be able to make it back to the shoreline.
If not for their voices, there would be almost no charm to this character. That shows how a performance can go a long way. Before moving on, as for other parents, Peri Peri's mother is just as firm a resident of La La Land. Jeremy is a big silly mushroom creature who sometimes serves as a guide to the kids, and other times as a protector of the forest. If there's anyone I'd trust with preserving nature, it would be this guy. He adds dimension to the personality of the forest, just by being shy and unsure, but also its biggest ambassador. One of Irving's friends is Moth, a Mothman with a hyperfixation on steampunk. That dominates his otherwise childish personality. They must have known quickly that options with him were limited, so went all out with the one big episode they gave him, and I should be grateful for that. One of Miriam's friends is Tara, a hairdresser spider. I mean, if you had to get your hair managed by anyone, why not a creature with 8 legs? There's also Bartlebert, her boss at the local library, who's a ghostly tree spirit who wants a quiet reading environment and has the temperament for the job. A less friendly pair is Randall and his mother Meryl. Randall is the local curmudgeon-y rental shop owner, and his mother doesn't help him out much. If you like bickering, you'll love these two. I'm just more interested in that replacement mom he got for one episode. Forget being a mom, why can't she be my wife? But now, we have the most depraved, insidious, morally bankrupt gang in the entire forest. Les Squirrels. They're French, and they want what's yours, and they will be really stinking cute while doing so. You have a whole family here, the one that talks, Marge, Bart, and the god pigeon in squirrel form. They've got to be my favorite characters in this show. I always looked forward to them coming back with another scheme. A character they stopped focusing on quickly is the Spirit of the Lake, basically the kid's pool guide for the lake. He's fine, but they did so little with him that they replaced him with someone else in Season 2. That's not much of a spoiler, but I will make it clear that if so, Season 2 has bigger spoilers than this.
Just spin the tail really fast like a propeller! Got it! Did it work? Heck yeah! It totally slowed your fall.
Harvey Beaks is the chillest Nicktoon since As Told by Ginger from 15 years prior. There is no contest. Even more mature Nicktoons between them with slower moments were typically action shows like the Avatar franchise. A show with slice-of-life plotlines set in a soft, breezy environment was something that had been sorely lacking from the network's lineup for too long. And they did it very well. The word relatable gets thrown around more than it needs to these days, especially when describing cartoons from the past decade. But that's a word that can describe Harvey Beaks better than any other. Relatable, relatable, relatable. The chemistry between Harvey and his world is very fun to see play out, and can be very personal depending on the viewer. The support of his parents, even if they don't always know what to do with him, and the nuances of his relationships with the other kids. There's a complexity to its simplicity. How a child can watch Harvey and Dade's interactions and be reminded of something they're going through, yet a grown-up viewer will find something nostalgic and innocent about it all. Childhood feelings aren't as complicated as adult feelings, which I think a lot of cartoon writers forget when they're writing children, except C.H. Greenblatt and his team here. One of my favorite things in Chowder was the chemistry between Chowder and Gorgonzola, and I am so happy that there was more where that came from. Better still is that a lot of the squabbling goes somewhere. There's a bit of character development depending on how prominent they are. It's clear that Harvey starts the show with clear personality flaws, like having a short temper when things go wrong, or an inability to handle change, but those are quite more under control by the tail end of the show. He's just one example, but there's also Fee and Foo opening up more to the other kids in Little Bark, seeing them less as vessels for their next round of pranks. The world also changes a little more due to their influence. There's one episode where Fee paints a purple mustache on a mountain, and it remains there for the rest of the show. It looks great, and so does the rest of the show. You can easily tell it's by the same guy as Chowder in a couple ways, like the backgrounds having deep textures to them, and the faces the characters pull having that Greenblatt flair to them. But Harvey Beaks manages to stick out where it counts. The textures aren't layered, making the world feel more photoreal than printed. The character designs are a little dressed down and less fanciful, with one big exception in Moth, who could fit into either world seamlessly. He'd be normal in Chowder, but he's particularly eccentric here. In terms of environment, I don't want to tell you all to touch grass, but spend some time in the nearest park under the trees, then watch an episode of this show, and you can more vividly picture the mood that they were going for. What Hey Arnold did for cities and SpongeBob did for the ocean, Harvey Beaks did for nature. Apparently, when scouting talent in pre-production, CH Greenblatt chose a lot of budding hobbyists on art sites, which is interesting but unsurprising with how fresh this show still looks even today.
You're all very talented and I believe in you.
Season 1 of Harvey Beaks strove to set itself apart from Greenblatt's earlier work and what Nickelodeon was doing at the time. They'll do low-stakes stories like the kids getting stuck in a tree or Harvey cooking for his parents. Stories that do have tension, conflict, and a resolution to build to, but are recognizable experiences for kids. There's excitement in the ordinary and familiar. Maybe a little too much excitement for Harvey, given he's the protagonist, our POV to this world. Of course it's not going to be too overwhelming. The things that make him tense up the most are still pretty ordinary happenings to his peers. The stories have a strong connection to childhood feelings, and the characters are demonstrated to have hearts, which is quite important in the cases of outsiders Fee and Foo. But in terms of humour, Season 1 is just okay. A little lowbrow at points, but I mean, hey, what are you gonna do about that? But that kind of stuff is prioritized less by the end of the year. The jokes become more character-driven, which works in combination with the characters gradually developing stronger personalities. Season 2 had a lot to carry on with, and it nailed it.
Rigor mortis.
I love Season 2 of Harvey Beaks. It is a fantastic follow-up. For starters, it's way funnier. Season 1's jokes were typically more simple and charming, but 2 has more of them and they're more elaborate and constructed. They weren't afraid to get a little sillier now that they'd done the work in making the world believable. Now it's believable and got a good sense of humor about it. And while it's the furthest thing from a lore show, Harvey Beaks decided to put more stakes in its continuity. The egg Irving and Miriam take care of finally hatches and is named Michelle. This new baby daughter is a handful and not very nice about it. She is a baby, so they flip between depicting her as unable to help herself and pure evil. Not a super consistent character, but if you want that, Harvey's family has been expanded upon with Irving and Miriam's parents. Miriam's, Aiden and Miley, are hardened investigators, so I see she had to rebel against something. Roland, the hardened father of Irving, makes for a different kind of grandparent, being more shut off to Irving, but that doesn't mean he doesn't love him, just that he loves him in a different way. Another old fogey introduced to the cast is Blister, a retired badger who Fee begins hanging out with. It's a more odd friendship, with them being at opposite ends of life, but having pranks and name-calling in common. You're gonna wish you knew him better because he dies towards the end of the show. It's really surprising that they went for this, and having Fee go through all of it from denial to acceptance, but this show had been so sweet and considerate of its cast that I knew they could pull it off. One last round of parents is Fee and Foo's, Barda and Grata, who make their debut in the finale. They're kinda wacky, and Fee is hurt by how long they've had to look for their kids since they were separated, but the sweet thing is a family has been reunited, even if that means the end of the show is marked by a status quo change. I'm certain the Harvey Beaks team were anticipating a third season, with Fee and Foo moving away in the season 2 finale meant to be a new wrinkle to the dynamic, but sorta like how the Chowder finale wasn't meant to be the finale, it's likely they got really unlucky again and had to make do with the final chapter they were able to print. The fact it's still an emotional and rewarding experience is awesome. Here are 15 episodes that should convince you that awesomeness was always in it. Here to help, the penultimate episode could have been given to any character, but they chose Tara and spun a story out of her commitment to work overtaking her drive to do it. This one's gonna resonate with you as you get better at the things you love to do. The amazing Harvey has him become a sorcerer of the dark arts, more specifically, a magic kit that alienates him from Dade by him not revealing the magic to, under the pressure of this goober of a magician. This is one of the better Dade episodes, which should tell you how much I love him and his antics. Operation Peanut Butter threw less squirrels a bone, with Harvey deciding to help them out on their latest heist. The forest wouldn't be the same without them, so it was nice, in fact too nice of Harvey, to help them get their groove back. Even though they consider themselves master thieves, they can do with a little help and friendship. Bag of Naughty is a parody of Lord of the Rings. Doesn't seem like it would be one, just the trio playing with some of nature's firecrackers. But making the firecrackers an analog to the One Ring, and Jeremy an analog to frickin' Gandalf, was a bold choice. Playing with these things is too dangerous, off to the volcano we go! Yampians shows us what game night looks like in the Beaks household. They play a game about yams, just like you wouldn't expect. It's an exercise in teamwork for Harvey, as he gets paired with Irving, who isn't very good at the game. Can he deal with failure at something he likes? Who will help get him through it? Alone has a story I can identify with on a personal level, having no friends to play with you today. So Harvey creates doubles of his friends with squashes. They all die. What I like most about this isn't even the dark humor, it's how much Harvey projects his love for his friends onto these things. That's what makes it truly tragic to see him lose them all. The Ballad of Muesli and Jangles depicts the courting of Miriam in a less conventional way than most other flashback episodes, as a bedtime story, so Irving is allowed to take a lot of artistic license on what really happened. But I think anyone can get the basic gist of the real events, which is really sweet in showing how they could have ever come together. Later Dingus is the saddest episode of the show, being the one where we say goodbye to Blister. He was sort of a grandfather figure to Fee, so her being unable to understand that he's dead can be read in a lot of ways. Does she actually think the death announcement is part of a prank, or is she in denial? It's not one of the funniest episodes, but it is one of the most dramatic, so I think it deserved at least 10 Golden Globes. Missing Harvey is the ultimate test for his friends. What do they do while he's away at a conference with his parents? Turn into Lord of the Flies, of course. If there's any pack of kids you'd want to see fall into disarray, it's this one, and it's over a good cause, not knowing how to go on with their lives without their good friend Harvey. Leaf It to Kathy isn't the debut of Kathy with a K, famously obscure Leaf vlogger, but it is her most affectionate appearance, with Kratz developing a crush on her. The plot is that Harvey's an incompetent matchmaker, but a substantial friendship does come out of it. I suppose after all the anxiety they put Kratz through over the course of the show, that they felt it would stick the landing if they gave him a proper BFF. Secret Gordon is a Peri Peri episode, so naturally disconcerting. She and Harvey find a secret garden, and after developing feelings for Harvey, Peri Peri feels protective of their time in the garden. Gordon the garden, as an entity, takes it the wrong way, and what we get is a spooky living forest kinda day in town. The Grunicorn is about this weird little tradition in Little Bark where the kids run around the forest trying to catch an imaginary creature. Fee and Ruta get stuck in a hole together, and since they're both very different socially, they have their disagreements, but because they're headstrong, they can work together to get out of the hole. They might even learn something about each other. Steampunks is the biggest story they ever told, being a two-parter and a fantasy genre adventure in the world of steampunk. After getting chastised by Moth for getting in the way of his friendship with Irving, Harvey dreams up a steampunk world where he's the bad guy, very fitting. But even though this isn't a style I know much about, I was really captivated by the adventure Harvey goes on. Do you ever think about how vivid cartoon dreams are? How they work in all these jokes and Easter eggs subconsciously? We need to give them more credit. The end and the beginning is the finale, a half-hour special that falls this high onto the list for pretty much being a 2-in-1 deal. The first half is all about Fee and Fu coming to accept their long-lost parents, as well as learn all the heartache both suffered and how they're gonna mend that. The second half is a reflection on what Fee and Fu mean to Harvey. We see how they first met, their final day together before the twins move away, and how they've changed Harvey's life in a very heartwarming way. But my favourite episode is Kathy with a K, because it means the most to me. Kathy's a big, lovable cat with a small following of Leaf fans. That's her special interest she loves posting videos about. But the more she's pushed to be a big star in the content creation metagame, the less happy she is with the new audience she's been given through less authentic means. This episode is a critique on big brand YouTube channels and a commendation on small homemade ones. It's sad that it's still very relevant nearly 10 years on, but it's still supportive of the little guys on YouTube and the drive to make material that matters to you. Would recommend this and virtually every Harvey Beaks episode, but I don't love all of them. Here's some I have a couple problems with. Harvey Fights Kratz is an episode that seems completely uninterested in its stated premise. It's more of an episode about Harvey and Kratz actually wanting to get along, but it's the rest of the gang getting them riled up at each other for no reason. It's funny in that way, but something had to be fifth worst. The punishment has a sound premise in Harvey over-punishing himself for a small misdemeanor, but just how far he goes isn't fun to watch. The jokes are okay and so is the story, but by now, you'd like Harvey enough to where this wouldn't be the next thing you want to see him do. Harvey's first scar is an earlier one about Harvey putting himself in harm's way, but at least here, he regrets doing so after asking Fee and Fu to give him a scar. Given how far they go in the no-takesies backsies, if this were your first episode, it would be a trip to take in that Harvey's good friends with them. Character development was still on its way. Photo Finished has a very useful message for parents in relation to social media, not to use your children for clout. But I'm not a fan of spending a whole episode hammering that message in, because it gets pretty worrying how far Miriam goes. Dr. Roberts too, considering how his family situation really is, but not to the same extent. My least favourite episode would be Anti-Valentine's Day. I guess I'm not a Valentine's Day type, but I have my reasons for not liking this one so much. It's really early in the show, it's about making up a rude holiday to combat Valentine's Day, and I think the whole point of what Harvey goes through could have been better conveyed. It's not a bad episode at all, I still find it funny, but I'd consider it the least charming episode of the show. Not by a lot though. To keep the wrap up brief, I really came around to Harvey Beaks more and more as it progressed. So far, my favourite Nicktoon I've covered from the 2010s. I know, the competition has been fierce, but Harvey Beaks has this really raw, authentic flair to it that I love to see in newer animated shows. A real creator's touch. I'm really excited for Jellystone whenever I get around to that someday. I've seen episodes in my spare time, and it's clear that Greenblatt's posse is just as clever as it ever was. Harvey is always going to be a distinct and important part of his body of work, so seek it out however you can. Oh, and Mikey is there too, I guess.